Her trembling teenage boy stands before Judge Frank Caprio, clutching a folded citation in both hands. His fingers twitch nervously. The edges of the paper crumpled from hours of holding on too tight. The courtroom, usually buzzing with quiet chatter, feels still. Everyone can sense this isn't going to be another ordinary case. The boy's name is Ethan, 16 years old, tall but unsure, his hoodie sleeves stretched over his palms like a shield. The fluorescent lights make him squint. He shifts from foot to foot, the sound of his sneakers soft against the polished floor. He doesn't belong here. He knows it. Everyone can tell he knows it. Judge Frank Caprio looks up from the bench, glasses resting low on his nose, the faintest trace of a kind smile softening his face. The judge has seen thousands of people stand where this boy stands. The tired, the defiant, the desperate. But this boy looks different. Not angry, not careless, just frightened. "Good morning," Judge Caprio says gently, his voice warm enough to fill the silence. "You here by yourself, young man?" Ethan nods. "Yes, sir." The judge tilts his head, curious. "No parent or guardian with you?" "No, sir. My mom couldn't come." "All right," Caprio says, voice steady, reassuring. "We'll make this easy for you. Let's see what we've got here." He opens the file in front of him, eyes scanning the printed words. "Citation number 37142, he reads, jaywalking across Main and Atwells Avenue. During traffic hours," he glances up. "That's a pretty busy intersection. Dangerous place to cross, huh?" Ethan nods, staring at the floor. "Yes, sir." The judge raises an eyebrow, half smiling. "Says here you ran across 2 lanes of traffic. That's not jaywalking, that's sprinting." Laughter ripples softly through the courtroom, not mocking, just light-hearted. It's how Judge Caprio often breaks the tension. But the boy doesn't smile. His hands stay clasped around the ticket, his knuckles white. "I know, sir," Ethan says quietly. "So I wasn't thinking." Caprio studies him carefully, leaning back in his chair. "You in school?" "Yes, sir." "Central High. What grade are you in?" "Sophomore." The judge nods approvingly. "Good, you getting decent grades?" Ethan hesitates. "Mostly." "Yeah," Caprio chuckles softly. "That's an honest answer. I like that." He pauses, then adds, "What do you want to do when you finish school?" Ethan shrugs slightly. "Not sure yet." The judge smiles kindly. "You've got time. Don't rush it. But tell me, son, you seem like a smart kid. So why'd you run through 2 lanes of traffic during rush hour?" "That's a dangerous move for anyone, let alone someone your age." Ethan's head lowers further. His throat moves as he swallows, but no words come out. The courtroom goes quiet again. Caprio's tone softens even more. "Take your time, son. I'm not here to scold you. I just want to understand what happened." The boy takes a shaky breath, then exhales slowly. I wasn't trying to do anything wrong," he says at last. "I just had to get home." The judge leans forward. "Something wrong at home?" Ethan nods slightly. "Yes, sir." Caprio narrows his eyes with concern. "Your mom okay?" "She's at the hospital," Ethan answers quietly. The judge frowns. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is she sick?" "She's okay," Ethan says quickly. "It's not about her." Caprio waits, not pushing, just patient. "Then who?" "My little sister," Ethan says. A ripple moves through the room. The words are simple, but the way he says them, slow, trembling, heavy, makes everyone straighten in their seats. Caprio's voice lowers to a gentle tone. "Your sister? What happened to her?" Ethan opens his mouth, but it takes him a moment to find his voice. When it finally comes out, it's thin, fragile, the sound of someone reliving something they wish they could forget. She wasn't breathing. The judge blinks, the smile gone from his face. She wasn't breathing. Ethan's lip trembles as he nods. "I found her on the floor." A quiet gasp escapes someone in the back of the courtroom. The sound of typing from the clerk's desk stops. For the first time all morning, even the air seems to stand still. Caprio takes off his glasses and sets them on the bench. "You found your sister on the floor?" "Yes, sir." "How old is she?" 8. The judge's tone is almost a whisper. "And what did you do?" Ethan's hands shake as he answers. "I didn't have my phone. Mom was at work. So I just ran across the street to our neighbor's house, Mrs. Hernandez. She knows CPR." The courtroom is utterly silent. Even the officer who issued the ticket looks down at the floor, his jaw tight. "I wasn't thinking about the cars, sir," Ethan continues, tears glistening in his eyes. I didn't even look. I just ran. Caprio leans forward again, his expression softening with understanding. And your sister now? How is she? She's okay, Ethan says, voice cracking on the word okay. She's in the hospital, but they said she's going to be fine. Caprio exhales, his shoulders sinking with relief. Thank God, he murmurs. The boy nods, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his hoodie. I didn't tell the officer. He just gave me the ticket. I didn't want to make excuses. Caprio shakes his head slowly, a sad smile on his lips. That's not an excuse, son. That's love. A wave of quiet emotion passes through the room. Some people stare at the boy with open admiration, others with watery eyes. The judge's voice carries gently across the courtroom. You know, Ethan, I've been sitting in this chair for a long time. Thousands of cases, thousands of stories, but not many like yours. He picks up the citation again, holding it between his fingers like a fragile thing. The law says you broke a rule, but the heart says you did exactly what a good brother would do. The courtroom remains silent. Every face, every breath is focused on that boy. Ethan looks up, his voice small but sincere. I wasn't trying to get away with anything, sir. I didn't want to lose her. Caprio nods, his throat tightening slightly. And you didn't, because you acted. You saved her. He glances briefly toward the audience. Sometimes we get so busy judging the act that we forget to understand the reason behind it. The law can punish actions, but only compassion can heal fear. No one speaks. The boy stands frozen, tears still glistening on his cheeks. But for the first time, he doesn't look ashamed. He looks seen. Judge Frank Caprio folds the citation gently, sets it aside, and gives Ethan a long, thoughtful look. We'll come back to this in a moment, he says softly, but everyone in the courtroom already knows something profound has shifted. What began as a routine ticket has turned into a story that would echo far beyond those wooden walls. And as Ethan stands beneath the golden morning light, still trembling but no longer alone, the world outside feels a little softer, because in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, humanity always has the final word. He swallowed hard. The citation crumpled in his fist, like something he wanted to hide. The courtroom held its breath in a way that felt almost physical. The hush of collective attention pressed into the room like weight. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the courthouse heating and the soft shuffle of a shoe on the wooden floor. Judge Frank Caprio watched him with patient, steady eyes, the kind of patience that had turned many confessions into moments of healing. Take your time, son, the judge said. I just want to understand what happened. Ethan drew a long, tremulous breath as if gathering courage from the air itself. His voice came low, frayed at the edges. I didn't mean to break the law. I had to get home fast. Something wrong at home? The judge asked, not rushing the boy's words but making space for them to land. A flash of responsibility crossed Ethan's face. Too much for someone his age. Yes, sir. My little sister. That single unfinished phrase knit the courtroom together. The clerk paused with her pen half lifted. A woman near the back cupped her hands over her mouth. Even the officers stiffened, an instinctive recognition that any story involving a child demanded attention beyond procedure. Was she in some kind of trouble? The judge asked softly. Ethan's voice broke. I found her on the floor. She wasn't breathing. The words landed heavy and absolute. For an instant, no one blinked. Faces turned pale. A cough went unmade. The pedestrian violation on the file, so ordinary a charge, dropped away under the gravity of those 4 words. You found your sister. Like that? The judge repeated, as if saying the sentence might steady the room. Ethan nodded, tears finally escaping in thin, hot lines. She's 8. I didn't have my phone. Mom was at work. I ran next door to Mrs. Hernandez. She knows CPR. I didn't even look at the cars. I just ran. There is a kind of silence that contains 1,000 small sounds when a story like that is told. The intake of breath of people who suddenly remember their own children. The soft clink of a cup set down too quickly. The faint scuff of a foot on polished wood. The courthouse felt like a small container holding something vast and fragile. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and set them on the bench. And what happened after you ran next door? He asked. We called 911, Ethan said. They came. They took her to the hospital. "She's okay now, sir. They said she'll be fine." Relief moved through the room with its own audible exhale. People who had been braced against sadness softened. A few hands dabbed at eyes. Conversations resumed in whispers, as though the courthouse had returned from the edge of something terrible. Ethan's fingers loosened their death grip on the ticket. "I didn't tell the officer everything," he admitted. "He gave me the citation. I didn't want to make excuses." The judge's face was a study in steadiness and compassion. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked. Not to judge, but to understand. Ethan swallowed. "I was scared. They'd think I was making it up. I didn't want to make more trouble for my mom. I just wanted to get back to the hospital." That confession, equal parts fear and fierce protectiveness, settled into the room like a verdict of its own. For the people seated on the benches, what had been a minor municipal matter suddenly revealed itself as the aftershock of a family crisis. Rules and citations receded into the background. A boy's heartbeat and an 8-year-old's shallow breath stood at the center. Judge Caprio looked toward the officer who had written the ticket. "Officer, did you have any idea what was happening when you issued this citation?" "No, Your Honor," the officer replied plainly. "We saw a pedestrian cross outside the crosswalk at a busy intersection. We issued a citation for safety reasons." There was no malice in the officer's answer, only the bureaucracy of a job done by the book. It was a reminder that the system works on observable facts, not on the invisible motives that often lie behind them. That was the moment when context mattered most. "Sometimes," the judge said, turning back to Ethan, "the law and life aren't the same language. The law sees a crossing. Life sees a heartbeat. What you did that day was an act of love, not an excuse, an explanation." Tears spilled freely now from people who had been holding them back. The courthouse became a chorus of quiet emotion. A woman in the third row dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. An older man's jaw worked as he swallowed. The whole room felt like it had been reminded of something important. How small decisions can carry the weight of a lifetime. "If this moment already moved you," someone nearby whispered, "because stories like these travel faster when felt, hit that like button. Because what Judge Caprio says next will restore your faith in justice." Those words would have felt out of place in a different setting, but here they hung like a gentle suggestion. If a story of compassion resonated, share it so that others might be touched as well. Judge Caprio's voice softened even more. "Ethan, when my own children were small, the thought of anything happening to them would have sent me running too. There are times when human instinct outpaces the law, and that instinct is often love." Ethan's shoulders shook with an exhale that was half relief, half release. He had expected admonishment. He had found instead a courthouse that could listen. That was the unique thing about this place, about this judge. The bench had become a shelter, not a barrier. "You did what you thought you had to do," Judge Caprio continued. "You ran toward help for your sister. That took courage. It also took fear. And it took a kind of loyalty that sometimes gets overlooked in paperwork." The judge paused, folding his hands and leaning his forearms on the bench as if to steady the moment. "We must remember why the law exists, to protect life. Sometimes applying it without context would be to miss the point entirely." Ethan's voice was a whisper. "I was terrified, sir. I thought, what if I came back and she wasn't breathing? I couldn't live with that." "You shouldn't have to," Judge Caprio said. "You acted on what mattered most. There is a tenderness in a courtroom when a judge speaks like that, when the words have the authority of law and the warmth of consolation all at once. The balancing of those two forces is delicate, to hold people accountable while also seeing them as human beings with complicated motives. That balance is what made the moment feel like a kind of redemption. "Officer," the judge added, addressing the man who had written the ticket, "do you feel the way you wrote it up then? Would you have written it differently, knowing what you know now?" The officer looked toward Ethan, then at the judge. He hesitated, the function of his knees and boots holding both duty and empathy. "If I had known the whole story at the time, sir, I would have handled it differently," he said. "Safety is our concern, but saving a life, well, that's above any ticket." Judge Caprio nodded and then, as if to allow the legal gears to catch up with human judgment, he looked toward the clerk and said, "Make a note of the circumstances. We'll take everything into account." For Ethan, the relief was tangible. He had come expecting a lecture, a fine, a box checked. Instead, he had found recognition, a community of strangers who, in hearing his truth, had rearranged their understanding of him from defendant to rescuer. "Son," Judge Caprio said finally, "we will address the legal part of this. But I want you to know as a human being that what you did was brave and right. You saved your sister. That is something nobody can take away." Ethan's eyes shone. He had been reduced to a citation in the system. Now he was seen as something else entirely. People leaned forward, sharing in a moment that felt like a small reprieve from a world that too often treated actions as only actions, never as expressions of love. The judge's words settled over the room like a benediction. People who had come in to argue over parking spaces left with a reminder of the fragility of life and the power of compassion. The courthouse, in its small way, had performed the hardest task of all. It had rehumanized a number on a paper. Ethan wiped his face with the back of his hand and managed a shaky smile. "Thank you, sir," he said. "Thank you for listening." Judge Caprio gave him a gentle nod. "Go check on your sister when this is done, and tell her the court is rooting for her." As the next case was called and people began to shuffle, the moment lingered. It would be repeated in kitchens and workplaces, in texts and online posts, as a testament to what a single choice, made in panic and love, could mean when met with understanding. Outside the courthouse, a world of noise and motion continued. Inside, for an hour or a day or a lifetime depending on how you measure these things, a roomful of strangers had witnessed something rare. A boy's fear transformed into action, and a system of law that paused long enough to honor the human heart behind it. The courtroom stayed silent long after the sound of Ethan's voice faded. The tension that had once filled the air had shifted into something softer, almost sacred. What had begun as a routine ticket for jaywalking had become a story that everyone in the room would carry long after they left. Judge Frank Caprio sat still for a few moments, looking at the boy who had just confessed not to a crime, but to an act of pure love. He took a slow sip of coffee, set the cup down gently beside the gavel and looked up. His voice, when it came, was steady, but gentler than anyone expected. "Ethan," he said, "I've heard thousands of cases in this courtroom, every kind of story, but very few like yours." The boy shifted his weight nervously, eyes darting between the judge and the floor. "You did something dangerous," Caprio continued, "but you did it for the right reason. You weren't trying to break the law. You were trying to save a life." He looked down for a moment, then added softly, "You were trying to save your sister's life." Ethan's throat tightened. His fingers, which had been gripping the edges of the podium, finally relaxed. Judge Caprio turned toward the officer who had issued the citation. "Officer, knowing what you know now, do you have anything you'd like to add?" The officer hesitated before answering. "Your Honor," he said, "at the time we only saw a teenager running through traffic. We didn't know the circumstances. But if we had, I would have helped him cross myself." A ripple of warmth moved through the courtroom. A few people laughed quietly through their tears. Judge Caprio smiled faintly. "That's good to hear, because that tells me something. That when we know the full story, our hearts tend to get it right." He looked back at Ethan. "You see, son, the law can only see what's on paper. But compassion sees what's between the lines." The boy nodded slowly, his eyes wet again. Caprio leaned forward, elbows resting on the bench. "You acted out of love, Ethan, and love is never something to be ashamed of." He paused as if to let the words sink in. "But I do need you to understand something. Your instinct was right, but your path was dangerous. Running through those lanes could have taken 2 lives that day instead of saving 1. Do you understand that?" "Yes, sir," Ethan said quickly. "I do. I know you do," Caprio said softly. "You're a good young man, and I believe your sister is lucky to have you." He smiled, that familiar, kind smile that had comforted so many before. "Now," he said, sitting back, "here's what we're going to do." The courtroom leaned in. Even the air felt like it was waiting. "I'm dismissing this case entirely," Judge Caprio said, voice clear and calm. "No fine, no record. No penalty, because justice isn't about punishment today, it's about understanding." The words landed like sunlight breaking through clouds. For a heartbeat there was silence, and then applause. Genuine, heartfelt, unstoppable. People clapped softly at first, then louder. So even the officer joined in. Ethan's head dropped, overcome with emotion. When he finally lifted it, he was smiling through tears. "Thank you, sir," he whispered. Judge Caprio nodded. "Tell your sister the people of Providence and this judge are praying for her full recovery." The boy smiled wider, his shoulders finally lowering. "I will, sir." Caprio chuckled softly, raising his hand for one last word. "And next time you decide to run through traffic, make sure it's to catch the school bus and not to dodge it." The room erupted in laughter. The tension that had gripped everyone melted away completely. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, Ethan laughed too. A quiet, relieved sound that filled the courtroom like music. As he turned to leave, a woman in the back called out softly, "God bless you, son," another voice added. "Take care of your sister." Ethan turned, nodded shyly, and whispered, "Thank you." When the heavy door closed behind him, the applause lingered. Judge Caprio looked down at the empty spot where Ethan had stood, his face thoughtful. That was the thing about his courtroom. It wasn't just a place where people paid for mistakes. It was where stories unfolded, where the law met humanity, and where sometimes both walked out better than they came in. Later that evening, the courtroom clip aired on local television. A short segment at first. Judge Frank Caprio dismisses jaywalking case after teen's emotional story, but within hours it spread far beyond Providence. On social media, the video went viral. Viewers shared it with captions like, "Faith in humanity restored. This is why the world needs more judges like Frank Caprio. That boy is a hero." Comment sections overflowed with empathy and reflection. Parents wrote about the moments they'd panicked for their children. Strangers recounted stories of times they'd been misunderstood. People didn't just watch the video, and they felt it. News outlets picked it up next. Reporters visited the courthouse. When asked about the story, Judge Caprio smiled modestly. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "The boy did. He reminded us all what love looks like when it's brave." And Ethan? He didn't care much about the attention. He just stayed home with his family. His sister was recovering, her laughter slowly filling the house again. He helped his mom make dinner, did his homework at the kitchen table, and sometimes paused just to listen to the sound of his sister breathing, alive and strong. A week later, a letter arrived at the courthouse addressed to Judge Caprio. Written in neat handwriting, it read, "Dear Judge Caprio, I wanted to thank you for listening. My sister is home now and she's doing great. Mom says you reminded her that good people still exist in this world. I'm working harder in school now. I want to make you proud." Ethan. Judge Caprio folded the letter carefully and placed it inside his desk drawer, right beside his coffee cup. Every now and then, on quiet mornings before court began, he'd take it out and reread it, a reminder that justice without kindness isn't justice at all. In the weeks that followed, strangers continued to visit the courtroom. Some came for their cases, others simply to shake the judge's hand. One elderly woman stopped him in the hallway and said, "That boy, he reminded me of my grandson. Thank you for giving him hope." Caprio smiled humbly, replying as he always did, "That's not me. That's Providence. We've got good hearts in this city." But everyone knew that morning had been more than just Providence. It was something larger, a moment of shared humanity broadcast to the world. In a world that so often rushes to punish, sometimes all it takes is one act of empathy to change everything. Ethan's story wasn't about a law broken. It was about a heart that refused to wait. It was about a brother who ran without thinking, because love doesn't stop to check for traffic lights. And it was about a judge, Judge Frank Caprio, who reminded the world that behind every violation, every case number, every trembling voice, there's a person with a story worth hearing, because law without compassion is cold, and justice without heart is hollow. So friends, if this story touched you, share it. Let the world see that kindness still matters, and ask yourself this: what would you have done in Ethan's place? Would you have run too? Like this video if you believe compassion belongs in every courtroom. Subscribe for more true stories that prove that justice at its best is simply love in action. Because in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, every case isn't just a citation, it's a story of the human heart.